Hello again. There cannot be a single person in this country who is not thoroughly familiar with the case of Stephen Lawrence, the black teenager who was stabbed to death by a group of white youths 30 years ago. His death became a cause célèbre and led to the suggestion that the Metropolitan Police were institutionally racist. Indeed, the police became the target for more criticism than the men who actually committed the murder. Lawrence's mother was subsequently made a peer and now sits in the House of Lords. One might have thought that what was virtually a carbon copy of this murder, with members of one ethnic group targeting somebody of another group and stabbing him to death within a few miles of where Stephen Lawrence himself died, might have stirred the memories of newspaper reporters and television news teams. But they do not seem at all keen to talk about what has happened. This is odd. Or perhaps it's not quite so odd, because the death which occurred in London a fortnight ago did not fit in with the accepted narrative. You see, the teenage boy in this case was white and his attackers were all black. On November the 26th, a 16-year-old white teenager called Charlie Patel was riding his bike along a road in Woolwich. A car full of young black men was, it seems, deliberately driven at the boy, who was knocked off his bike. The young men then jumped out of the car and hacked him to death with knives. In the process, one of them was accidentally wounded by one of his companions, and when they had finished killing Charlie, they bundled their injured friend back into the car and left the scene. The injured youth, a black male called Kern Solanka, subsequently bled to death. Two black guys, Alagi Jobe and Hussein Bar, have been charged with murder, together with two younger teenagers. Now, of course, I have no idea at all whether those charged with this crime are guilty, and so make no comment on that. What is indisputably true, though, is that 5 young black men targeted a 16-year-old white boy and stabbed him to death in South London. Very likely many viewers heard vaguely of this case a couple of weeks ago and then forgot all about it. After all, young men are always being stabbed to death somewhere in London these days. Here is a simple question. Let us imagine that the ethnicities in this case had been reversed. Suppose that a carload of white youths had targeted a 16-year-old black boy and stabbed him to death in this way, not far from where Stephen Lawrence died. Do viewers honestly think that the murder would not have been front-page news, and that newspapers like The Guardian would have been comparing it with the murder of Stephen Lawrence? The headlines would have written themselves. You can just see it now. 30 years on from Stephen Lawrence's death and nothing has changed. Black youths are still being killed by mobs of young white men. It would have been an absolute godsend for journalists. This is because it would have fitted the standard narrative so neatly, and it would have been all over the place by now. Because it was a 16-year-old white boy, though, the case is fast sinking from view, and within another day or two will be completely forgotten about until the trial at the Old Bailey. As I say nothing about the possible guilt or innocence of those charged with murder in this case, and I've no idea if they were even involved in the business. But don't viewers find it a little sad that if this had been the death of a black youth rather than a white one, it would have been regarded as being more important and worth thinking about? As usual, I'll give a couple of links in the description to this video. I'm sure that viewers will be able to find out a lot more about the case if they do a little bit of Googling.